I'm Steve Jacobs. I've been a professor at RIT for way too long. And while there, I helped found both the academic programs in video game design and development and in the Magic Center and Magic Spell Studios that just had its fabulous opening this past week. You may have seen that in the news. And here tonight, I'm going to be introducing two colleagues from RIT. We're going to talk to Dan Schneiderman, and we're going to talk to Rob Mostyn. Dan is a Rochester native, and he's an RIT alum who joined RIT as a hire as the community outreach coordinator for the free and open source software initiative at Magic that I'm lucky enough to head. And our interest in both of these gentlemen was in the work they were doing in the community before they came to work for us. So Dan's work in the maker movement here in Rochester and co-sponsoring the Mini Maker Fair, which has now grown into a full-grown Maker Fair, thanks to Dan and his team. And because some of the principles in open source software underlie the Maker movement as well, he was a great match for us at RIT. While he was working as the community outreach for the FOSS program, and he's now the community outreach program person for the K-12 efforts at RIT, Dan won the Digital Rochester Great Award as an emerging leader, and City newspaper named him one of Rochester 10, and he's doing a great job in the K-12 coordinator position. The person who's going to be sitting up here next to him is Rob Mostyn. Rob's an Adirondacks native who moved to Rochester in 2007, and he's Magic's Digital Games Hub coordinator. He's an MCC and SUNY Fredonia alum. He's got degrees in psychology and graphic design. But it was his work as a musician and a percussionist that brought him into the indie game field. And he now leads a 3-year-old effort called ROC Game Dev that's just taken space downtown in the Sibley building. He's going to talk about that. I'm going to ask each of them 2 questions about what they do and then give them an opportunity to respond to 2 questions together. So Dan, Rob, come join us. I might just keep this one. All right, so Dan and Rob, just so you know which elf is which.
It's true. It's true.
So Dan, our wonderful storyteller, Larry kind of led us into what is a maker, but there's been this thing for about 10 years or more called the maker movement. Can you talk to us about what that is and what a maker fair is?
So I have to give huge props to Larry to really nailing down what the maker movement is. It's really people coming together to make things, and it can be anything. It can be sewing, it can be knitting, it can be working on robots. It's all about sharing resources and coming together. And the fact that the entire movement just really spun up when things started to be popular online, microcontrollers became cheaper, people started making more and more things together.
And the Maker Fair?
So Maker Fair is this giant show and tell mixed with a science fair, a craft fair, and a carnival. You'll find, and there's a reason why I say carnival, you'll find everything from robots and couches that can drive to sewing, knitting. Origami will be there making a big balloon sculpture. And part of the reason I say carnival is because we are going to have 17-foot tall fire blasting trumpets right on Main Street this year. If you saw the fire-breathing dragon last year, that was at our event.
If you haven't been to a Maker Fair before, but you have been to Imagine RIT, you'll find a lot of similarities. So if you liked Imagine RIT but haven't been to a Maker Fair, you're going to love the Maker Fair. And when is it this year?
It's 10 days away. It's November 17th. And then the special thing I like to point out that we're doing this year is we have a whole student day on the Friday, and we're going to have over 1,200 students in attendance, 3rd to 8th graders, not only from Rochester, but from Syracuse, Buffalo, and the Southern Tier.
And so is that an outgrowth of what you do at K-12 for RIT? What kind of programs run there, and what are you doing?
So the student day kind of came before, but I recently joined the K-12 program, and I do a lot of our outreach. RIT's K-12 program reaches out to about 5,000 students a year, both through Kids on Campus and through grant-funded programs, and I work with kids to basically make things, introduce them to new topics, introduce them to a whole new world of STEM. STEM and STEAM, I should say.
And are there particular programs at RIT that you manage, or is it just a kind of come talk to us and we'll set you up?
RIT's K through 12 department is kind of a great go-between, RIT's wonderful staff, faculty, even some of our students with the rest of the community. I hop around. I specifically help a lot with the STEP program, which works with underrepresented students and introducing them to new topics.
Okay, great. So, Rob, what is an indie game developer? Like, what's a maker? What's an indie game developer? And what does ROC Game Dev do to support the indie community here in Rochester?
Yeah. So an indie game developer, you can almost liken to an independent musician. They're doing all of their own work on their project. They're promoting themselves. They're doing their own marketing. It might be a small studio of a group of people, but they're doing all the work themselves. So that's something that we've seen kind of come up in the past 10 years or so. And there's some indie games that have been done by one person or a small team of 5 that have gone on to sell, make like millions of dollars. Like, it's insane for a small team to make that much money on a game, but we're starting to see that. There's a website and an application called Steam. You can kind of compare it to like the iTunes for PC games. That gives people direct access to games, and independent developers direct access to people to sell their games. So because of developments like that, we're seeing more small studios, more independent developers kind of make their own games, do their own projects. Now, ROC Game Dev formed out of me starting to make my own game, wanting to talk to people and not being able to find anyone in Rochester to talk to about games. And I really didn't know anything about games. I didn't know how to make them. I was a graphic designer at the time, and I'd been a musician and making music for games. But I was making games in a vacuum. So I started this meetup. And it kind of snowballed from there, and what it's become is like multiple meetups, socials, and workshops, really supporting the community, bringing people together, connecting them. It's a great way for an artist who doesn't know how to make games to be like, hey, I want to make a game. Where are the people I can meet to do that? How can I, learn from them? It's really become a community to do that and really like engage with others.
And what's going to happen in the Sibley building now that you're there? Right.
Yes. So just last week, we opened up our own co-working space in the Sibley building. We've been around for 3 years, and for about a year now, one of the demands has been for our own space. We've been lucky enough to be hosted at RIT Magic. We used to be at the Irondequoit Public Library. But then, we'll do socials and things like at Swillburger or at Boulder Coffee or someplace like that. But we always wanted our own space to kind of do our own events. Really a space to do what we wanted to with it. We see the same thing out in Buffalo. Buffalo has Buffalo Game Space. They've been around for 4 or 5 years. They're at about 70 paying members. People rent their own desks, their own offices there. And the same thing out in Troy, New York. They have Tech Valley Game Space. Very similar model, a little bit more of an open shared space. But seeing those models work, I thought that those could definitely work here in Rochester with what we have.
So instead of co-working, it's co-creation, basically?
Yeah. I mean, it's a co-working space, but that's kind of a broad title. I mean, we're going to be doing, gaming nights. We're going to be doing workshops. We're going to be hosting events. We're talking right now to one of our members to do an art opening because he's an artist on games, and he wants to display his work, and we need to hang up art right now. So why not have an art opening and get people into the space as well? Paying members get 24/7 access to the space, but we will have events that are open to the public and encouraging people to come through and check out what we got going on.
Nice. And so that's your avocation. Your day job is being part of the New York State Game Hub for Rochester and at RIT. What's that? Right.
What is that? Digital Game Hub. So there's 3 of them. There's one at RIT, there's one at RPI, and there's one at NYU. And this was New York State kind of catching on that digital games are an industry, right? A $30 billion industry. And they kind of wanted to catch up. We're seeing this industry really blow up, obviously out on the West Coast, but in places like Austin, Boston, Toronto. So the state wanted to catch up, so they developed these grants. Again, they went to RIT, RPI, and NYU. And really what my job concerns with or deals with is just talking to and about the local game development industry and community, both here in Rochester and in New York. The narrative is often, hey, people are making games. Sometimes that comes as a surprise to some people that there's 3 or more studios here in Rochester making games for companies like Nickelodeon and Disney. That there's small teams making games and that they can make a living on these games. If they sell enough. But this is obviously an industry that's being developed and is growing. It's young, but it's growing, and it can happen anywhere. We see a lot of it out on the West Coast, but it's an industry that could definitely sprout up here or continue to grow in New York. It's something it's a lot of fun. It's really cool. With RIT being one of the top-rated schools, it would be great to see it continue to grow and become a bigger thing here in New York.
And the same, both the Game Hub and some of the funding for the Magic Spell Studios came out of New York State's interest in supporting the interactive media and game industries the way they support the film and television industries. So 4-ish years ago, that division of the state government held hearings at NYU and up here at RIT to kind of ask those communities what did they want, how did they need, what kind of support would help grow the industry. They knew that we had 3 very successful studios here, small studios here, Second Avenue Learning, Darkwind Media, and Working Man Games, all of them tied very much to RIT and the resources that are here. Darkwind Media having been founded by students, Working Man having been founded by a faculty member, and all 3 of them use co-ops extensively to help build their business. So, as a question for the 2 of you, what do you think it is about Rochester that supports these types of creative industries up here? People think of the things that happen here as New York City, as Austin. People don't automatically think of Rochester, that happening digital maker game hub place. Mm-hmm. So what is it?
Well, I would say Rochester has that maker spirit in our blood. We've always been makers, even going back to, I would consider the Erie Canal the biggest maker project of New York State. But there's this group of artists, there's this group of technologists, there's all these science, there's people mixing together. I mean, we talk about creative collisions, and that's what a lot of it is. It's people coming together and wanting to make things. No one in Rochester can really stand still. We just love coming together. We love mixing art, mixing science. I mean, look at Kodak and how the whole film industry came really heavily out of here. And even today, you can see all these, you can't go anywhere in Rochester. I know I parked in the garage, and right next to it is work by Sean Dunwoody. It's on our streets, it's in our schools, it's in our companies, it's everywhere. We have that strong maker lifeline.
Yeah, I kind of got my first taste of it back in 2010. I started with a friend, a group called Rochester Chip, which was, we were booking concerts for bands that created this music called chiptune, which is utilizing retro video game systems to make music. This was the type of stuff happening in New York City, happening in Boston, happening in Chicago, and we wanted it to happen here, so we just started booking shows, and we kind of became this stop for all these bands. It would be crazy to see a band come from New York City or Chicago and then be like, oh, we got to stop in Rochester. And everyone's like, who, where? Rochester? But it was my first taste of, okay, if you start something, people are gonna be drawn to it. People are gonna want to be part of it. They're gonna want to help. Especially we had a huge draw from the RIT students for that. And it was really my first taste of like people being involved, people being interested, and this kind of pride that comes with, hey, I pitched into this, I helped out with this, I'm part of this. Even in a smaller city, they're proud to say, I helped do this. Even if they move on, move out, go somewhere else, I constantly have people touching back and being like, hey, how are things going back there? What's going on? How did this turn out? How did this go? So it's really cool to see that. And, that whole chiptune thing kind of rolled into when I started ROC Game Dev.
So it's not just because it's always dark and always cold that we're doing this stuff, right?
Yeah, you got to stay busy.
It's funny because my next question was about, you kind of started to lead into in terms of how do the efforts that you guys are involved in, things like maker spaces, maker fairs, artistic groups, how are these helping to grow Rochester? What do you think? Is it an internal growth? Is it a draw? Is it both?
Yeah, I guess it's both. There's the internal growth with just, like I said, attracting people. But then, I have people reaching out from outside the city wanting to come here and talk about it. Or, hey, when I'm in town, can we meet up and talk about game dev? Even if it's people not coming from a larger city where these things already exist. I've had people reach out and be like, hey, you're doing this ROC Game Dev thing. How do I get that started? Somebody in Syracuse this past weekend was talking about that. And that's like, oh, cool. I guess we're doing a good job. People are hearing about it. I don't know. Dan?
It's definitely both. I mean, Rochester's first makerspace, we had our first hackerspace in around 2009. And you can even go further back by looking at all the woodworking shops. And it's been a lot of internal growth, but I'm always amazed of how many people come out of Rochester or leave and then come back and bring others with them. Yeah. There's a lot of, just look at the Rochester Brainery, was a lot of locals coming back. I know I left for a while, got to meet lots of cool people, came back here, and a lot of people just love that inspiration. I also just want to point out, the maker movement has grown so big in Rochester. We actually have people coming from South Korea and Italy this year.
Wow. Yeah.